What if the most powerful nation on earth was brought to a standstill by a crowd inside one embassy? In 1979, Iran exploded. In revolution, a king fell, a new regime rose, and decades of anger toward foreign influence reached a breaking point. Then, on November 4th, armed student militants stormed the United States Embassy in Tehran and captured American diplomats. What began as a protest became one of the most shocking international standoffs of the 20th century. For 444 days, the world watched in suspense. Presidents were tested, families waited in fear. Secret negotiations unfolded, and a daring rescue mission ended in fire in the desert. The crisis would topple Korea's reshape U.S.-Iran relations and leave scars that still influence global politics. Tonight, we journey into the real story of revolution, hostage drama, failed rescue, and the final deal that ended a nightmare, but not the consequences. Welcome to History Ledger. This is the story of the Iran hostage crisis. 444 days of diplomatic tension. In the final months of the 1970s, the Middle East stood on the edge of transformation. In Iran, one of the oldest civilizations on earth, streets that once displayed royal ceremony now echoed with chants of rebellion. Crowds filled city squares, factories shut down, and protest marches grew larger each week. The rule of Shah, Pahlavi, long presented as stable and modern, was collapsing before the eyes of the world. For many Iranians, years of political repression, economic inequality, and dependence on foreign powers had created a storm that could no longer be contained. Shah had ruled with powerful security forces and close support from the United States to Washington. He was a strategic ally in a region shaped by the Cold War. To many of his critics inside Iran, he was a monarch sustained by fear and foreign backing. Old grievances ran deep. One memory in particular never disappeared: the 1953 coup that removed Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh after he challenged Western control of Iranian oil. Many Iranians believed outside powers had stolen their political future once before. Now they were determined to reclaim it. As unrest spread, a powerful voice returned from exile. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a cleric expelled years earlier for opposing the Shah, became the symbolic leader of the revolution. His speeches, recorded on cassette tapes and passed hand to hand, reached millions. In February 1979, he returned to Iran to a reception unlike anything the country had seen. Vast crowds surged through Tehran to welcome him. The monarchy was finished. A new Islamic republic was being born. But revolutions do not erase suspicion, they often sharpen it. As Iran's old order fell apart, anger toward the United States intensified. Many protesters saw America not as a distant nation, but as the protector of the Shah and an architect of past interference. Anti-American slogans became common outside diplomatic buildings. The U.S. Embassy in Tehran, once an ordinary symbol of international relations, was increasingly viewed by radicals as something darker, a center of hidden influence. The embassy diplomats watched events with growing unease. Staff members knew the atmosphere had changed. Demonstrations could turn hostile in moments, yet embassies are designed to endure tension. Their mission is to maintain communication. When politics become dangerous, no one could know that this compound would soon become the center of a global drama lasting more than a year. Then came the decision that lit the fuse. In October 1979, the former Shah was admitted to the United States for medical treatment in Washington. Officials described it as a humanitarian move. In Iran, many believed it was the first step in a foreign plot to restore him to power. Fear, memory, and revolutionary fury combined into a single explosive force. On the morning of November 4th, 1979, thousands of demonstrators gathered near the embassy walls. Among them were militant students who called themselves followers of the Imam's line. What began as protests quickly became invasion. Climbers scaled gates and walls. Chains were cut, doors were smashed, guards were overwhelmed. Smoke, shouting, and panic filled the compound as embassy personnel rushed to destroy classified documents and find safe rooms. Some Americans escaped through side exits and found shelter elsewhere in Tehran. Others were captured inside offices and hallways. Hands were bound, blindfolds were tied, cameras flashed as hostages were paraded before the press. The images spread across television screens worldwide. Within hours, a diplomatic mission had become a hostage. At first, 66 Americans were taken in the weeks that followed, released including women and African American staff members. After Iranian Authorities claimed solidarity with oppressed groups, but 52 Americans remained in captivity. Their imprisonment would continue for 444 days. Each day would become a number repeated in headlines, broadcasts, and family prayers across the United States. Made the seizure even more significant was what happened next, rather than immediately ending the occupation. Iran's revolutionary leadership embraced it. The hostage crisis became a political weapon. It unified factions, energized supporters, and challenged a superpower on the world stage. Students searched embassy files, reconstructing shredded papers, and alleging secret plots. The compound itself was renamed by some as the den of spies in Washington. Shock turned into crisis management. President Jimmy Carter demanded the hostage releasing called the seizure a violation of international law, yet outrage alone changed nothing. Diplomats scrambled, allies were consulted, emergency meetings began, but the hostages remained behind locked doors in Tehran, uncertain of their fate. For the families of those captured, time slowed to agony. They did not know when letters would come, whether their loved ones were safe, or how long the ordeal might last. For millions watching around the world, the question was the same: how could the most powerful nation on earth be brought to a standstill by a crowd inside an embassy? Answer was already unfolding. This was no ordinary standoff. It was a collision of revolution, memory, pride, and power, and it had only just begun. As the first shock of the embassy seizure faded, a new reality took its place. The hostages were still in Tehran, still blindfolded, still uncertain if they would ever return home. What many first assumed would be a short diplomatic crisis was becoming something far more dangerous, a test of endurance between two nations that no longer trusted each other. In the United States, every passing day deepened the sense of humiliation. The images from Tehran were impossible to ignore. American diplomats held captive while armed guards stood over them. For a country accustomed to projecting strength, the crisis felt like paralysis. Citizens demanded action. Newspapers printed daily updates. Television anchors opened broadcasts with the same question: how long would this continue? Soon the crisis became part of American daily life. News programs began counting the days of captivity one by one. The number rose relentlessly. 10 days. 50 days. 100 days. Each increase carried emotional weight. Families of the hostages appeared on camera asking for answers and pleading for their loved ones. Safe return candlelight vigils were held in towns across the country. Yellow ribbons became symbols of hope and solidarity. At the center of the storm stood President Jimmy Carter. Already facing economic troubles at home, he now confronted the greatest foreign policy crisis of his presidency. He suspended normal routines and focused intensely on the hostage situation. Advisors, diplomats, intelligence officers, and military planners cycled through the White House in constant meetings, yet options were painfully limited. A military strike risked killing the captives. Inaction looked weak. Negotiations moved slowly and often collapsed. The Carter administration first turned to pressure. Short of war, Iranian assets in the United States were frozen. Diplomatic appeals were launched through allies and international institutions. The United Nations condemned the seizure. The International Court of Justice called for the hostages released, but legal rulings meant little to militants in Tehran, and symbolic victories did not open prison doors inside Iran. The hostages were moved from room to room, sometimes separated for long periods. Many endured interrogation, isolation, and psychological pressure. Some later described not knowing whether footsteps in the hallway meant food, questioning, or something worse. Their captors understood the power of uncertainty. Fear itself became part of the prison. Meanwhile, Iran's revolutionary leadership benefited politically from the standoff. The crisis inflamed nationalist sentiment and weakened moderate voices who favored compromise with the West. Every American demand could be framed as proof that Iran would not bow to foreign pressure. What had begun as a student action was now entangled with the future direction of the revolution. By early 1980, patience in Washington was running out. Public confidence was eroding, and the presidential election year had begun. Carter faced a brutal dilemma: continue waiting for diplomacy or attempt a rescue mission deep inside hostile territory. If it succeeded, the hostages could come home. If it failed, the consequences could be catastrophic. The answer came in secrecy. U.S. military planners developed a complex operation known as Operation Eagle Claw. It would require long-range aircraft, helicopters, special operations forces, refueling points in the desert, and precise timing across vast distances. Few missions in American history had demanded such coordination. A rescue force would enter Iran, covertly move toward Tehran, seize the hostages, and escape before Iranian forces could respond. On the night of April 24, 1980, the operation began. Transport aircraft flew low across darkness toward a remote desert staging site known as Desert One. Helicopters launched separately from a carrier in the Arabian Sea. But almost immediately, problems emerged. Dust storms reduced visibility. Mechanical failures struck. Multiple helicopters' navigation became difficult. Timetable slipped. The forces finally assembled at Desert One. The situation was worse than planners had hoped. Too few helicopters remained operational to continue safely. Commanders faced the decision: no rescue force wants to abort the mission or push forward under worsening odds. The order was given to cancel then. Disaster turned into tragedies. Aircraft prepared to withdraw, and swirling dust and confusion, a helicopter collided with a transport plane loaded with fuel and personnel. A fireball erupted in the desert night. Flames consumed equipment. 8 American servicemen were killed. Survivors scrambled through smoke and wreckage as the mission collapsed around them. The rescue force retreated, leaving behind burned machinery and classified materials. By sunrise, the world knew instead of a dramatic liberation, America had suffered a highly visible failure on foreign soil. The hostages remained captive. The dead would return home in coffins for President Carter. The political damage was severe. He publicly accepted responsibility, but the image of competence he needed was shattered. Critics argued the administration had appeared weak, then reckless. Supporters insisted he had faced impossible choices. Either way, the crisis now defined his presidency. Iran, the failed rescue, is celebrated by many as proof that divine favor protected the revolution. The hostages were dispersed to new locations, making any future rescue attempt even more difficult. Hardliners gained strength. Trust collapsed further yet. Beneath the anger in headlines, another truth was emerging. Military force had failed. Sanctions had failed. Public pressure had failed. If the captives were to come home alive, the path forward would likely run through negotiation, not firepower. While the world focused on the wreckage in the desert, quieter efforts continued behind closed doors. Messages passed through intermediaries. Conditions were explored. Demands were tested, and with an American election approaching, time was becoming its own weapon. The number on television screens kept rising. 100 days, 300 days, 400 days. The crisis was no longer just about hostages. It had become a struggle over power, prestige, and the limits of force, and the final act was approaching. By the second half of 1980, the Iran hostage crisis had become more than a diplomatic emergency. It was now a global symbol of deadlock. The 52 Americans remained in captivity. The United States remained unable to free them, and both governments were trapped by politics, pride, and public expectations. After months of confrontation, one reality was becoming clear. Neither side could simply walk away. In the United States, the crisis dominated the presidential election year. Every development in Tehran carried political consequences. In Washington, President Jimmy Carter continued to pursue negotiations, but the length of the ordeal had eroded confidence in his leadership. Americans had watched the day count rise for more than a year. For many voters, the hostages represented national honor, and their continued captivity became a measure of presidential strength. Carter's challenged former California Governor Ronald Reagan argued that America needed renewed confidence and firmer leadership. The campaign unfolded under the shadow of the crisis. Foreign policy, economic anxiety, and the sense of national frustration merged into one turbulent election season. When Americans voted in November 1980, Carter was defeated, yet even after the election, the hostages were still not free. Behind the scenes, however, movement had begun, with military options discredited and public stalemate exhorting both sides. Negotiations intensified through Algerian mediators. Algeria had maintained channels with Tehran and Washington and became the essential bridge between two governments that no longer spoke directly. Quiet diplomacy now carried the hopes that armies and threats could not deliver. Iran's demands centered on sovereignty, money, and security. Tehran wanted access to billions of dollars in frozen Iranian assets held abroad. It sought the return of the Shah's wealth or compensation connected to it, and guarantees that the United States would not intervene in Iran's internal affairs. For revolutionary leaders, these demands were not only practical, they were symbolic proof that Iran could force concessions from a superpower. The United States focused on one goal above all others: bringing the hostages home alive. American negotiators worked through legal and financial details that were extraordinarily complex. Frozen accounts, international claims, banking mechanisms, and future disputes all had to be addressed. What the public saw as a hostage drama was also becoming a maze of law, diplomacy, and economics. As the talks progressed, the hostages endured their final months in captivity. Some were moved again, some sensed that change might be coming, but had learned not to trust rumors after so many false hopes. Even optimism could feel dangerous. Survival meant enduring one more day than another. Then, in January 1981, the breakthrough arrived. On January 19th, the two sides agreed to a settlement known as the Algiers Accords. The agreement arranged the release of the hostages, the unfreezing of certain Iranian assets, and the creation of mechanisms to resolve future financial disputes between the two countries. It was not a peace treaty. It did not restore friendship. It simply ended the immediate crisis. Final twist remained the next day, January 20th, 1981. Ronald Reagan stood in Washington to take the oath of office as the new President of the United States. At almost the same moment, after 444 days in captivity, the hostages were released from Iran and flown out of the country. Timing mattered to many observers. Tehran wanted to deny Carter the political victory of welcoming them home during his presidency. Whether symbolic or strategic, the message was unmistakable. Even the ending of the crisis was shaped by power and images. The aircraft carrying the freed Americans departed. Iranian airspace. Families across the United States erupted with relief. Tears, embraces, and celebration replaced months of dread. The long countdown was over. 50 to hostages who had entered the embassy as diplomats now returned as national figures whose names had become known around the world. Yet, freedom did not erase the damage for the United States. The crises exposed vulnerabilities that shocked the nation. It influenced military reform, intelligence, coordination, and the future development of special operations forces. The failed rescue mission in the desert became a lesson studied for years. American leaders also carried forward a deeper skepticism about the stability of the region and the risks of revolutionary politics for Iran. The crisis strengthened hardline elements in the new Islamic Republic and helped to define the revolutionary state through resistance to the United States. But it also deepened isolation and helped to lock the country into decades of hostility with the West. A dramatic short-term victory of all the hostage crises transformed relations between Iran and the United States for generations. Diplomatic ties were severed, mutual suspicion hardened into doctrine, future disputes over war, sanctions, nuclear policy, and regional influence would all unfold in the shadow of 1979. The embassy walls in Tehran had been breached in a single day. Rebuilding trust would prove far harder. History often remembers wars by their battles and treaties by their signatures. But some events are measured differently: by silence, by waiting, by the number of days families count on calendars. For America and Iran, 444 days became more than a statistic. They became a scar, and though the hostages came home, the crises never truly ended. The hostages were released. The countdown ended, but the shadow of those 444 days never disappeared. What began with broken embassy gates became a turning point in modern history, reshaping presidencies, changing military strategy, and poisoning relations between Iran and the United States for generations. Some crises end when prisoners come home. Others continue through decades of mistrust. And that is why the Iran hostage crisis remains more than a headline from the past. It is a warning about revolution, power, pride, and how quickly diplomacy can collapse. Thank you for watching History Ledger. If you enjoyed this journey into real history, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story from the past. And if you think this crisis changed the world more than people realize, wait until you see our next episode.